How many of you guys like XCOM? Final Fantasy Tactics, those type of turn-based games, like kind of like a grid-based gameplay. If so, I think I got a game for you guys. It's called The Lost Ilions. It's developed and published by Ocean Drive Studios, and this is my review for that game on Steam. Let's get it. Now, let's talk about the performance of this game. This game actually performed relatively well. I will say there was some hiccups for the game. Now, it's not enough to really, dock the game for anything. I actually felt like they did a decent job optimizing this game for it. I felt like a little bit like frame rate issues here and there. But besides that, I think the game ran relatively well. Now, keep in mind, like I said, I'm playing this on the Steam. I know it's going to come out on the Epic Game Store and Xbox eventually. I can't speak for those versions. I assume if it runs like this game, it's going to run relatively smooth. And that's pretty much all I got in terms of performance. I like to usually put the presentation and what the game looks like with performance. And in terms of presentation and actual graphics, I feel like this game is a more realistic approach to this type of style, this, turn-based, grid-based gameplay than I've really seen in most games. Even games like XCOM has like a little bit of a cartoony style. This is a very realistic looking game, and I actually have to really give my hat off to this company. They did a very good job of presentation. I think all the characters look good. I think the environments look good. I think that the actual animations look good. For the most part, there wasn't nothing wrong with the presentation of this game. I, for one, was getting tired of the animations on Magic. I felt like they were all the same thing. Like, when you actually do a spell in this game, they open up a book, they read through it, and they shoot the spell. And then it will come in from the sky down. Now, I think the majority of that was done for, aspects on saving money where you don't actually show the spell being made or anything. It just comes down straight and hits. Now, some of the later spells is a little bit different, but for the most part, they would open up a book and it would shoot down. Now, it's like I said, I don't think it was a huge thing. It was mainly done for budgeting reasons, I would assume. But I do feel like they could have done a little bit differently in terms of how these were presented to you. Now, another thing that I didn't really like is when you defeat an opponent in this game, they kind of like crouch to one knee and then they fall and disappear. I kind of felt like when you're actually in the battle and you shoot the arrow, you hit them with the sword, or you threw them with the spell, have different animations that just crouch on one knee and then go to the overall map and then he falls. Felt like they could have did that a little bit better. Probably one of the biggest things that annoyed me with this game was in Lost Aliens, there's an actual animation where the main characters are talking to someone on the field. They'll actually like throw their sword. I thought that was getting very annoying. Every time something was like intensified, instead of having some like epic music being played to show you that this is a very serious situation or this moment is a serious moment, they would like have him like throw his sword back or strike his sword. I'm like, come on, man. It's kind of corny. I ain't gonna lie, just a little bit. It wasn't being taken seriously. Like, imagine talking to someone, and then when you sit there and you come across someone, there you have this altercation with them, and it's an intense moment, and he's like, whoof, whoof. Like, I was just like, could have did that better, man. I'm not saying like put some music on there or anything. I think I would have preferred them just to get removed entirely because it was just very corny to me. And that's not anything against the game. That's just me nitpicking it to death. But that's just how I felt about it. Now let's talk about the gameplay of Lost Aliens. Like I said, it's a turn-based game. For the most part, if you like those Final Fantasy Tactics XCOM style games, you're going to like this. You fight a variety of creatures from monsters to people. What I like about the gameplay of this is you actually have a stronghold kind of thing. Most of the time when you play these type of games, you're not really trying to break anything down for the most part. There are certain occasions where certain events in something like XCOM, you actually have to do structure damage, but it doesn't happen a lot. But what I enjoy about this game is a lot of the time you have to fight them on an upscale battle where they'll be on top of mountains or on top of buildings, and you actually have to use a ram and break down the front gate. Now, sometimes you'll be broken up into multiple people, sometimes you won't. But what I really appreciate in this is they make you feel that you're fighting uphill battle the entire time. Keep in mind, you're supposed to be mercenaries, small groups fighting bigger opponents. And I feel like a lot of the times in these games, they make the bigger people feel like the smaller people, where a lot of the time in story related stuff like this, when you come across these big units, these big entities, these empires, it's always small units. And, the story of those other games where you take these smaller entities and you eventually build up enough force to fight the bigger entities. On here, it actually felt like I was fighting an empire. It felt like they were being a defensive structuring management position. And I actually really enjoyed that, where you're sitting there going into these towns, you're fighting them, you have to ram the gates, and you have the people up at the top shooting magic at you, shooting archers at you. It felt like it was an actual war. I think another thing that really put a lot of emphasis on the gameplay of this game is how the presentation of the battles happen. It's a little bit annoying, and it's really amazing at the same time. And let me explain. All right, so when you're actually fighting people in the battlefield, they come up with your typical turn-based, grid-based style gameplay, where they have their own little space, they move a certain space, they attack, and etc. Same thing with the enemy. Now, what I like about this game, what I don't like at the same time, is you'll be on there and there'll be just one unit. Well, when you come across and you actually fight them, there's like an army going around. There's a giant battlefield with people going swords all out. And I'm like, why was that in the actual overhaul gameplay, where you actually moving people around? You don't see these people fight. And I think they do that mainly. It's like a commander kind of thing, where the people you're moving are the commanders in this actual war, and when you actually swing on someone, you're seeing their army that they're commanding. It's not the worst thing in the world. It's not, I felt like it's kind of a double-edged sword, where it's really cool when you actually see it, but it kind of takes away the immersion a little bit when you actually zoom back out to the actual battlefield, that you're moving around these pieces and you don't see all those soldiers fighting. Felt like maybe if you could have done that in the actual campaign, it would have made a little bit more sense, and not these random, not monsters, but these random soldiers popping up randomly when you actually zoom in and actually do the combat itself. The UI of this game is actually pretty well done. It gets straight to the point. I feel like it could be confusing there at the beginning, but once you figure out where everything is, it's nice to see it done to the point where when I want to find something, it's easily found. You have your equipment tab, you have the tab with your Grimoire, and what a Grimoire pretty much is just what your mages wear. You can actually equip different mage spells to those Grimoires, depending on what level they are. There's actually a class system in this game, and I do think that the class system is a little bit underwhelming in terms of the amount of diversity you can have in how you want to play the game, and those individual characters want to play the game. I don't think it ever took to the point where I wasn't feeling like I never had options. I always felt like I had options. I just felt like they could have gave me a little bit more variety of gameplay with every character, and not just, you're going to play someone with an axe, you're going to play someone with an archer, you're going to play someone with a mage. I felt like they could have did a little bit more in choice on, mixing those together. Now, I'm not saying they didn't do that to a point, but, we've seen other games do it a little bit better, and this game does do it decently. I'm not going to say it doesn't in terms of class system, but I do feel like, like I said, a little underwhelmed. Now, in terms of story, you guys know I usually save the story. I don't really talk about the story too much. This story is actually pretty good in here. I'm not going to say it's like fantastic or anything like that. I do feel like they try to cram too much dialogue into you. There will be, like, when you're doing the side stories, you'll be sitting there for 3 or 4 minutes easy just doing dialogue. And I know that that's really good in building lore, building character development, and I'm not saying don't do that. I'm just saying be a little bit more selective of when you do that. I don't want to sit here and have 5-6 minutes of dialogue and have these cutscenes when I could be in there in the gameplay that you've done very well when I'm sitting here talking to people all day. Now, like I said, don't not do it, Ocean Drive. It's just maybe if you make a sequel, limit that a little bit. I don't want to do that, man. And I'm not saying that lore and stuff and character development's not important. I'm just saying that when I'm having all of this time in here listening to NPCs, I would prefer being in the combat a little bit more than that. I feel like 35, maybe 30, 70. 70% in gameplay, 30% outside of gameplay. That's why I like what XCOM does. XCOM doesn't really have a lot of those style when it comes to what you do out of battle. You know, a lot of it has to do with outside is you're building up the arsenal, the items, the research to actually take into the battle and fight. So I feel like XCOM does this system better than almost anyone else because they found a good balance. And I feel like this game is a little bit too much in the hub world, man. You're talking to too many people. And one thing I can honestly say is when you actually do get into the combat of this game, they overwhelm you with units. Now, sure, this is one of the games I will say you actually have a lot of units at your disposal. That's why the class system may be the way it is, where they don't give you a whole lot of diversity. But I will say this game has a lot of diversity in terms of how many people you take in there. If you want to take 3 archers, 4 knights, you can for the most part. You know, they give you access to a variety of different people all the time. You're constantly having strangers join the hub world that you can eventually get them to join your crew. So I give them props for that. It's just in terms of dialogue and story related stuff, break down a little bit on that. Don't let us be in there in the hub world talking for 20 minutes on like pointless dialogue sometimes, like finding books. I'm not for that. Now, the question is Lost Aliens worth your money? I actually think you guys should go out there and buy it. It's on Steam currently. I do think it's coming to Xbox eventually. So if you want to wait for the console version, you know, I don't blame you. But I think if you like these turn-based games and you have a PC, you should go out there and buy it, man. The gameplay is solid, very fun. Obviously, like I said, they could have did a little bit more of animations and just some of the presentation settings in general. Now, as far as the presentation, it's a very realistic looking game, and I think a lot of you are going to enjoy that style game because, like I said, you got a lot of cartoony looking game when it comes to this style. And I'm not going to say that stuff like XCOM's cartoony, but it does got a little bit of a cartoony looking art style to it. But this is a very realistic looking game. And I think a lot of you might actually, that's never played these style games, might actually look at this game because of the realism in terms of art style. So yeah, definitely go out there and spend all that money. I think it was a very enjoyable experience and it's worth your money. So that's my review on The Lost Aliens. I actually really enjoyed the game. Thank you for the review code. By the way, they did give me a review code, but you guys know, doesn't matter if they give this game to me, man. I'm going to give you guys my opinion. And what my opinion is, this game's worth your money. See you guys.